Okay, everyone. My name's Arin Sime. I'm founder and CEO of WebRTC.Ventures. Thanks for joining us for the webinar today. So let's go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining the webinar today on telehealth and WebRTC. Again, my name is Arin Sime from WebRTC.Ventures. And also joining with me today is Dr. Marty Brewster, founder and CEO of Wellbeing Consult.
G'day, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're going to talk about WebRTC and telehealth, and also specifically Marty's experiences so far with building Wellbeing Consult. And the first thing we'll do is a little introduction to telehealth and WebRTC, then a little introduction to Wellbeing Consult, see a few screenshots from that. Marty will give us a little bit of the background on that, then talk a little bit more about some specific aspects of WebRTC that make it really valuable for telehealth applications. And then at the end, we'll go into more Q&A with Marty. That's the agenda. So again, thanks for joining us. Since most of you came in here today because of an interest in both WebRTC and telehealth, I imagine that you have some of this background already, but let's just quickly make the case for telehealth. Telehealth is remotely connecting medical care providers and their patients in a variety of different specialties. And it's incredibly important and becoming more and more important for a number of reasons. One of them being that population worldwide is aging, and aging populations means that there's more medical care necessary coming up. And we know that preventative care can reduce long-term costs in the medical system, which is a good thing as we have more people that we need to provide medical care to. We also know that remotely located or underserved populations don't have equal access to quality or the level of quality of healthcare as everyone else, or the specialized care that they may need. And as patients around the world get more and more access to the internet and through mobile devices also, it's making it more and more viable to serve wide populations. And so this is certainly an area that, that I'm interested in as a software development company. WebRTC.Ventures provides software design and development services for a number of sectors based around video communications and WebRTC. And for Marty, this is also a very interesting space to be in. So let me tell you a little bit about him. He is an Australian-trained medical practitioner with a background in remote general practice. He spent the last couple of years in Micronesia working in refugee health, where utilizing telehealth was a daily practice. So through that experience, he's grown familiar with some of the barriers to a quality telehealth experience. And he's really passionate about improving access to healthcare for all communities, in particular mental health communities, and also changing the way that health professionals work so that they have greater control and can lead more fulfilling and balanced lives themselves. So all of this has led him to his current role, which is as the founder and CEO of Wellbeing Consult. And Wellbeing Consult is a platform and marketplace that you'll see more of in a minute for creating online private practices for health professionals, allowing their clients to be seen anywhere and anytime. And that's one of the great promises of telehealth in general. Now, the WebRTC part is, if you're not familiar already, WebRTC is an HTML5 standard for video communications in the browser. The easiest way to describe what WebRTC is to say that it's like Skype for your browser, meaning that the same sort of video communications that you see in Skype, one-to-one video chat, can be built directly into browser without any tools. So you don't have to download a tool like Skype. You can have those communications directly in the browser and therefore directly in your application. So as a medical professional, you have, say, the website for your practice, or a website that you use like Wellbeing Consult, and you can connect directly to your patients through that tool in the browser without having to give them any additional instructions for things that they need to download, like Skype. And I say standard is in quotes because it is still an evolving standard, though it's close to version 1.0 now. It is quite mature, though, and being used in production It's supported in Chrome and Firefox and Opera browsers. And we'll talk more about some of the pros and cons of WebRTC as we go through this. So a couple quick examples of telehealth. There's a recent press release from Walgreens. In their mobile application, they've added in the ability for users to consult virtually with physicians. And those physicians can even prescribe some medications through the application. Large companies certainly taking on telehealth and the idea of virtual consultations in general. Another interesting case study that I've seen comes from it was published on the American Telemedicine Organization website, and talked about a case study from the Atlanta, Georgia area. And one of the things that they identified in this region, and probably true in general, is that underserved populations have higher rates of preterm births. And when a baby is born early, there's a lot of other associated health problems that can come along with that, or at higher risk. And in this Atlanta area, there were a little over 18% of the people in that region had preterm births. And so what they did was start remote group consultations where mothers who their pregnancy was due at the same month, in other words, they were going to be at the same stages of pregnancy together, that they would do remote group consultations together along with a medical professional, and that this was a big benefit to them because in this area and in these underserved populations, it meant that the mother didn't need to get childcare or pay for transportation to get to the appointments, and so they could participate more reliably in the process and get the advice and care that they needed to have a safe and healthy pregnancy. And so this case study pointed out that in that area studied, then the rate of preterm births dropped to 8%. So a big difference, and shows the value of telehealth for remote populations. So WebRTC is this HTML5 standard all about connecting two users through the browser. And when they are connected, they basically have peer-to-peer video, audio, and data connections. So they can do video chat with audio. They can also exchange data directly between their browsers. And when I say peer-to-peer, what that means is that all of those data streams and media streams are being exchanged directly between their two browsers without any server sitting in between, which is a big deal for telehealth applications because it makes it less likely that someone could intercept that data and steal it, and makes the data more secure. So the two browsers still have to connect with each other through another website or server, and in WebRTC speak, we call that signaling, which basically you could think of it as one user calling the other over the telephone network, for example, and so the signaling server is kind of like the phone book that helps them connect to each other. But once they've established that WebRTC connection, everything else is exchanged over these peer-to-peer channels without any communication through the server. So WebRTC has a lot of applications beside telemedicine. We're focused on telehealth in this session, but I'll just mention it's obviously video conferencing, customer service, contact centers. So there's a lot that you can do with this. But let's talk specifically about it within relation to telehealth and Wellbeing Consult in particular. So this application, Wellbeing Consult, that Marty and his team came up with the idea for, and then our team at WebRTC.Ventures helped with the design and the development of that, the implementation of Wellbeing Consult, on top of a WebRTC platform called TalkBox, which I'll say more about in a few minutes. Marty, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the type of work that you do that inspired you to create Wellbeing Consult?
Okay, so I guess as you said in the intro, the last couple of years I've been working in a remote Pacific island, and it's about 24 hours in an emergency before we could get a plane in there. And there's only general practitioners there, so about 1,200 patients, and often needing to liaise with specialist medical professionals, and also needing to medevac patients. So it was pretty routine that we'd be getting onto the telehealth system that was available out there, and liaising with various other specialists from all around Australia. And at various times it would run very smoothly if the specialist at the other end was familiar and had all of the hardware set up and had the same sort of identical software that we were using in their practice. It could all run fairly seamlessly, but then every time there was a new practitioner, it would all get a little bit too hard, and it would take a lot of work to bring them up to speed and get things working properly. So I guess I sort of thought, this must be being able to be done a lot easier than what it is, and I started looking into telehealth and where it was all moving, and started to come across WebRTC before too long. And I thought, it was incredible because it was so seamless and simple, and because you could drop it straight into the browser. It meant you didn't have to have special software necessarily, as long as you had sort of an internet browser. Then the people at either side of the consultation could easily connect. And hardware-wise, well, there's no hardware that goes with it. It's just if you've got a computer or laptop that's sort of bought in the last 5 years, that all sort of come standard with microphone and camera.
So within Wellbeing Consult, you have the ability to search for therapists, schedule a consultation with them. And one of the things that you might notice about the model for Wellbeing Consult is that it does have a specialization around it, around mental health and therapists. And in general, I think that's a good idea. Another interesting telehealth example to point out is Maven app, which is focused on medical care for women. And it's an example of having a very specific specialization so that you can go and add a lot of value beyond just the video chat. In a sense, then, the video chat part becomes value that you're adding to your customers, but you need to do more than just say, hey, we can connect people together by video chat. You need to offer them a specific community or a specific marketplace of experts that they need, and add value beyond just saying you can talk to each other over video. WebRTC provides that, but it can provide it for anyone. So if you want to have a competitive advantage, I think looking at some sort of specific niche for your application is really smart. So let's talk about WebRTC and telehealth, why they go together so well. Medical professionals have been reluctant to use a tool like Skype in the past because they need to adhere to compliance and regulations for privacy of patient data, and they can't guarantee that through someone else's tool. So WebRTC has this great thing about that traffic of the video and the audio and the data all being encrypted. And that makes it possible to build a HIPAA compliant, HIPAA being the Patient Privacy Protection Act in the United States, but many other countries have something similar in place. And even if they don't, it's at least good best practice to protect patient data, right? So WebRTC makes that more possible because of the encryption between the two peers. And because it's peer-to-peer, as I mentioned, there's no intermediary server that can be easily hacked. And the other nice benefit, not necessarily HIPAA related to the regulations, is simply that there's no plugins required for the video chat part. So you can have quick in-context communications within your tool directly from the marketplace. And there is a little asterisk there. There's a disclaimer around this, the statement no plugins are required, because right now it's Chrome, Firefox, and Opera browsers. And then the new Microsoft browser Edge supports ORTC, which is similar to WebRTC. So those browsers will be able to talk to each other without any plugins, but other browsers cannot. Internet Explorer and Safari. And also, if you want to do screen sharing, it should be pointed out that that always requires a plugin and some additional permissions as well. There is, of course, a lot of security considerations built into WebRTC that make it possible for HIPAA situations. Not only is the video, audio, and data encrypted while it's in transit, but WebRTC also makes sure that the user knows that their camera is about to come on and ask for their permission. They have the option to block the camera if they don't want to share it with you. The data channel part, if you're not exchanging video and audio, you have an application that's only exchanging data between two browsers. There's no permissions required for that. At least currently, there's some controversy around that in the WebRTC space. Simply using WebRTC does not make your application HIPAA compliant. That's something very important to point out. It enables it, but it doesn't automatically make it HIPAA compliant. So there are a lot of, and there's a ton to be considered about HIPAA compliance in general that goes even beyond the technical aspects. But a few other things that you need to think about in your telehealth application about HIPAA compliance on the technical side is that any data that you store or at rest has to also be encrypted. So any of that patient information, their login passwords, of course, but also other information, maybe medical data that you're storing about them, has to be encrypted. All of the data has to be encrypted in transit. That's the part that WebRTC helps with, and then also having SSL encryption and SSL certificates on your site helps with, so that the data is encrypted when it's traveling and when it's stored. And then other things too, like having strong access controls around your application so that people can't see other patients' data if they're not allowed to. Patients can't see other patients' data. When someone logs into the tool, making sure that they automatically are logged off. Having auditing in the database around when changes are made to data so that you can see who made changes to someone's medical records and when, and that any patient identifying information, PII, is always protected. I do love WebRTC, certainly, but I want to make sure to point out there are some negatives to it as well. Most prominently, that the Safari browser from Apple and Microsoft's Internet Explorer browser do not support it. Also on mobile browsers, the support is poor. You need to have a native mobile application in order to use WebRTC on an iOS device. On Android devices, there is some browser support for it, but people still typically build native applications for many situations. And WebRTC is great for one-on-one video chat conversations, and you can do more than one person. You can have group video chat with it. But WebRTC doesn't scale very well to large conversations. So if your telehealth model is to have, say, 20 people in a room together, all with their video cameras on, and say like a group therapy session or a group consultation of some sort, WebRTC has challenges getting into conversations that large, and you need to look at a more complex application involving a media server. So for Wellbeing Consult, we built on top of a WebRTC API from a company called TalkBox. And there are a number of companies that do this, but TalkBox is one of our personal favorites. They're backed by Telefonica, and they've been doing this for quite some time. They're an early adopter and leader in the space. And what they provided to us on the development side is, to any WebRTC project, is that they give you APIs for mobile devices, which is a big help. And all of the media and signaling is encrypted. One of the big things that they help with is connecting users across, say, corporate firewalls. Say the hospital may have a corporate network with extra security on it, for example. And so having that extra assistance on the networking side that they provide in making the peer-to-peer connection between users is crucial. So HIPAA compliance is possible on top of TalkBox, but it does require good practices, and they've, in their FAQ, linked to some of those, and we'll provide those to you after the call as well. One last aspect of WebRTC that I want to mention before we go into more Q&A with Marty is that there is this data channel part. People get very excited, understandably, about the video chat aspect of WebRTC, but it does also enable peer-to-peer exchange of data between the browsers, and that has a number of interesting applications. We use it for text chat in Wellbeing Consult. You could also use it for transferring files if you want to transfer files directly between the a doctor and a patient, for example, and make sure that that file, which may be, an X-ray or some sort of private medical information, that it's not going to get left on a public server. And that's important to consider in telehealth too, because again, we want to add more value to doctors and patients than purely the video chat whenever we can. And so I think a lot of the interesting future of telehealth is also going to be about combining that with sensor data as well. So remote sensors can add additional data point and value to that, or provide some remote monitoring access even outside of the conversations. And the WebRTC data channel, because of its peer-to-peer and encrypted nature, is an interesting option to consider for transporting that data, as well as other real-time data exchange protocols such as WebSockets too. Along those lines, just wanted to briefly mention a mobile application that we built recently for a hackathon that basically, using an Apple Watch, monitors your heart rate and the patterns in your heartbeat. And if it detects that you may be having a heart attack, can automatically send a text message or make a phone call to your loved one. This particular application we built doesn't have WebRTC in it, but you could still imagine it also being used to trigger video from the phone of, what's the scene around this person who may have just collapsed, or to send some other data over the data channel to medical professionals. Marty, you still with us?
Yeah, still here.
Excellent. You told us a little bit about yourself and how you came into the idea of Wellbeing Consult through the type of work that you do and what interests you about WebRTC in general. Now that you've been through the process of building a WebRTC-based solution, did you have any surprises along the way, good or bad?
Well, I guess the one major surprise for us is that we were able to actually get it done because we come from non-technical background. So, when I say we, are talking about myself and my brother, who's been helping me all along getting this done. And neither of us are technical, but we just sort of had the idea of what we wanted to do, and just sort of, you remember, Arin, we just sent an email and said, this is what we want to do. Is this possible? And
sure.
Yeah, that was the surprising thing. We just kept adding in more and more requests, just saying, not sure if we could do this, but we wouldn't mind. And, it just keeps coming back like, okay, we'll find a solution on how to do that. That was really good. The big piece of advice I'm learning now is that, like Nick and I, we've actually just started going back and doing some formal courses in basic technical stuff. Learning programming for non-programmers. Started to learn some Ruby on Rails. We're doing a 1-month course on those sorts of things, and I'm finding that's really, really helpful. And I wish I'd sort of done it 6 months ago, or right at the beginning. That would have made it a lot easier to have the conversations, I think, with everyone. Even though it's still been very easy, but
sure.
That's my one tip. But even though a lot of the people listening, they may come from technical backgrounds, so it might not be relevant for them.
But certainly having some exposure to the basic concepts of software development and what that implies for building a minimum viable product, definitely a big advantage whenever you have that, so that you can understand what the developers are saying when we say, this isn't really possible, or it's possible, but it's going to take a lot more time or cost or something like that. Yeah, that's definitely great advice. The more that you can understand about software development, certainly the better. So what sort of feedback have you received about the application so far?
Yeah, so we took our MVP, if you like, along to a conference recently, which was the Australian Psychological Society conference, and we were exhibitors there, and we were running demos and showing people what we were doing. And the feedback was, overwhelmingly positive. People on that audience, they couldn't believe how seamless it could be. In Australia, people are used to using Skype. About 90% of consultations, teleconsultations, are still done using Skype, and that in itself is a huge barrier, as we discussed earlier, with the security concerns. A lot of people just don't ever consider doing teleconsults because they feel like Skype's the only option, and they realize that security is a bit of an issue there. So when they saw that there was this video consultation capability directly through the browser, and I was explaining about the added security features, they were kind of blown away by that. And then when you add on all the additional things that you can build around that core experience, which is that core communication experience, you can add on things like invoicing within the app, messaging within the app, calendaring, and the clients can search for profiles and choose the exact consultant that they want. That's those sorts of things that you can build all around that core communication experience. Those things are just sort of a lot of the psychologists just couldn't comprehend that was available now.
That's great.
It was pretty cool.
That is very cool. That's awesome. Have you found that the concept of Wellbeing Consult or telehealth in general, is it an easier sell to doctors, to the medical professionals, or to the patients? Do you feel like one side or the other benefits more from that method of communication?
Well, I guess our business model is very much to make it as valuable as possible for the consultants, and that's sort of who we're targeting. I guess we feel like that the consultants are our customer, and the patients are our customer's customer. So if we keep our customer happy, if we keep the consultants happy, then we're automatically going to be keeping the patients happy. But it doesn't necessarily work if you that way, the other way around. So what we've built with it in mind that it's going to be something that we can that the consultant types are going to be the most happy with. Having said that, I still think we've kind of split into two categories. We're finding some consultants or psychologists are the main ones that we've approached so far. Some of them are just like, yeah, this is great. We're straight onto it, and they can see the value straight away. The patients are all sort of the same. I'm getting good feedback once they start using it, and they sort of don't seem to split into two categories. But then we've got this new category of consultants that I guess are just resistant for whatever reason. They just sort of, I don't know if we'll ever get them on board using telehealth, because they just prefer the face-to-face model, and that's fine.
Sure.
So yeah, we've sort of found, I guess, we've built it for consultants. They're the ones that see the value the best. The patients are all on board, I guess, but then there's this other group that maybe we'll never get to, and that's fine.
No, but it's an interesting point to make, that if you build a great tool for the patients, but the consultants, the medical professionals are not seeing the value in it, then obviously that's a key part of the equation that you don't want to miss. So by making sure that you satisfy the needs and the features that the consultants, the medical professionals need, then anything that you do to delight them as your customer, you're helping them to delight their own customers, and then it becomes beneficial for both sides of that network. So it's a great point. So you mentioned that there's some consultants, it's been a hard, are not interested in the idea of remote or virtual presentations. They prefer face-to-face. Is that because are there certain situations where maybe telehealth is not useful, or other places it's better suited to, like certain situations or certain parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing initially on mental health, and I think it works great for mental health when in the non-acute situation. So the reason it works quite well, I guess, is a lot of mental health is a talking therapy, and with video and audio, you can accomplish most of that. I guess face to face will always be the gold standard, but but you can get most of the way there with the technology that's available today. Where it doesn't work with mental health, though, is in, I guess, an acute or emergency setting. We advise on every page on our site that if you're in a suicidal sort of or psychosis type emergency, this isn't the platform to be using, and they should be calling emergency services. So it's 000 in Australia and 911 over there, I guess. And so that's one situation where you just you wouldn't do this. However, I mean, we've built, as you know, if there is some sort of unforeseen circumstance where the consultant needs to get emergency services out to a client, it's built in that there's an emergency contact available in the client profile that they have to fill out. Their address is there so that they could send an ambulance over to their house if necessary. So there are some safeguards that we've built in, which is another good application of WebRTC. You can build that stuff around the video and audio chat function. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. Great point. Yeah, and an excellent point, of course, too. There are those particularly critical emergency situations where it may not be appropriate, but it sounds like it's really great for the sort of routine, regular checkups, regular appointments that sometimes people miss because they can't get there in person, and having this as an option at least is adds a lot of value to be able to do that remotely. So, what about? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, particularly in Australia, where it's such a big country, it's not uncommon for people to live 6 hours away from the nearest mental health professional, and people do drive that far. So sometimes people are in Australia generally are sort of, I think, accepting of telehealth as a possible solution. They've used it before. It's been clumsy, but I think they can see that it's all starting to come together. So
that makes sense. Yeah. The geography of Australia lends itself particularly well to it. It's a good point. Although I would say too, perhaps even in say Sydney, I don't know about Sydney, but certainly say New York or Washington D.C. or San Francisco, sometimes it might take you 6 hours just to get across the city. So. Another situation where telehealth could be a huge advantage.
Yeah, that can happen in Sydney.
I'm sure. So my last question then, all right, what are kind of the next steps for Wellbeing Consult? So where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, I guess we've said a few times that we're starting with mental health professionals, but I think there's definitely scope to expand it to the full range of medical services providers, general practitioners, so the primary healthcare system, and then the secondary healthcare system with all medical specialists on board, and then also the allied health system. So adding on things like nutritionists, dietitians, speech pathologists, physios, like pretty much everything has starting to show that it's useful even to do telemedicine. Even these particularly hands-on sort of professions like physiotherapy have got good applications with telemedicine, with the technology that's coming out. So I guess we're open to all of those, to adding more and more providers and almost sort of building a health system in the cloud, if you will, and building in referral processes between consultants, the ability for doctors to give prescriptions online, that sort of thing. And as I guess more and more sort of technology comes on board, they'll be able to do more remote examinations as well. So some of the apps and that you were showing, I mean, the Internet of Things is going to sort of make it possible to effectively examine a patient without even being in the room. And we've had a conversation previously, Arin, and I'm starting to get a bit excited about I guess the next step beyond WebRTC, which is virtual reality consultations, where people might just put on a headset and be transported to a virtual world, a particular therapeutic setting, a beach or something like that, where they might have their therapy session. I'm not sure how far away that is, maybe 5 or 10 years, I guess, but we certainly want to be sort of on the forefront of that.
Yeah,
whenever
absolutely.
it comes about.
Yeah, certainly with the future of healthcare in general is going to be really interesting to see as the populations age and there's more needs, and as technology continues to advance. And I look forward to having a consultation with you on a beach of Australia or Costa Rica virtually, and even better in person sometime. So there's a lot of, this is definitely an exciting time to be in this space, and a good time to be an early adopter of it, so that we're ready for what those next steps are. So thanks again for your time, Marty. Really appreciate you joining us from Australia today, and have loved working with you in general. So always great to talk with you again.
No problem.
So reach out to us anytime with additional questions that you have, or if you're interested in building your own WebRTC application, I'd be happy to speak to you about that as well. We do the complete design and development, testing, deployment services around WebRTC and video communication applications for web and mobile. You can learn more about us at WebRTC.ventures. You can learn more about Wellbeing Consult at WellbeingConsult.com. And thanks again for your time, for being here today.